Hello, everybody, and welcome to Will Talks podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest with me. His name is Gerry Docherty, and he's presently in Cyprus. A renowned educational consultant, has worked with several organizations, schools, and chains of schools across the country, across different continents, and presently is looking at working with several school chains, maybe across India or anywhere around the world. So, welcome, Gerry. I'm so glad to have you today in our remote podcast. How are you today? Where are you logging in from? And set the context to anything that you'd like your audience to hear today.
Thanks very much, Willibrord. Thank you very much for the opportunity and for inviting me on the show. I'm currently based in the northern part of Cyprus, so the Turkish region of northern Cyprus. Just moved out here in August in the last 43 years working in schools across the world. This is a new venture for me, stepping into the consulting space, but looking forward to it, and it gives me an opportunity to develop my other interests, which are still linked to education and how we can enhance students' learning. I was teaching mathematics. I spent 7 years in that school and then moved on to my first international position in the British school in the Netherlands, just outside The Hague in Holland, and had a great 5 years there, thoroughly enjoyed it. Moved on from there to school in Bermuda and then Switzerland as housemaster in an international boarding school. Then my first head of mathematics position in campaign school in Athens in Greece. Then back to the UK for a few years as head of maths in one of the oldest schools in the country, Durham School in England. And then moved out to Southeast Asia, where I've spent a long time. Initially 8 years in a school in Singapore as deputy principal and then academic analyst, whole school academic analyst. And from there to Kazakhstan as director of studies with the Willibrord schools. And then my first principalship in Palermo, in Sicily, and then to China, where I spent over 5 years in China as headmaster, and then I'm working the principals team in the Shenzhen College of International Education, but 4 years as headmaster at Malvern College in Chengdu. So and then ultimately as regional head of education for Southeast Asia for Beacon House in Malaysia. Beacon House is a massive organisation with a presence in 7 or 8 different countries across the world. And then a short time as executive principal at Sophia High School, the online British school. So it's been an interesting journey so far.
I mean, from what I've heard, you've traveled probably across the world. You've circumnavigated and you worked in schools in the UK, certain Nordic schools, Southeast Asia, schools in China. And also it looks like you worked across different kinds of establishments. So standalone schools in larger chains, international schools in different countries. And of late, I heard you mention you were also part of an online school.
Yes. And in fact, still contribute. I'm still working, doing some authoring work with Highgrove Education, which used to be Harrow School Online, but it's changed to Highgrove Education now, which offers quality British education to children all over the world.
What's online. The name of that school?
Highgrove Education is the name of the
Highgrove Education. And now this is 100% fully online school that is run from England and giving British education, high quality British education to children across the world.
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. So you have a very, it's a very illustrious career. And I think it gives you so much of understanding of context and how context plays into the effectiveness of education. I feel that. So from a context question, I wanted to really I'm very curious to know how does a school organization structure look like across these different countries? Just, would you like to share that? Are they organized in pretty much the same way in Southeast Asia and in maybe in the UK or in some other countries? Is there a principal, a vice principal, or have you noticed anything different in terms of the organization and also the size of schools. Like many of the student population in Southeast Asia is much higher, I think, in schools than in this. But these are just curiosity-based questions. Any thoughts?
Sure. Generally speaking, the structure is pretty similar, I would say. Of course, it'll differ from one school to another according to the needs of the school, really, in terms of the leadership structure. So that really should be determined by the needs of the school and what your vision and mission and values are about and how you're driving things forward. But generally speaking, it's quite similar, particularly since the vast majority of the schools that I've taught in have been international schools. So usually either offering the British International Curriculum or the IB curriculum. So structure across the board is pretty similar. But of course, that also can depend on the number of students that you've got within the school as well. So again, it's sort of needs-based, really. The needs to determine what structure you should put in place, really. But quite similar, yeah.
Got it. And did any of these schools that you worked in, did you have any need or requirement to be able to market or communicate the benefits of your school to potential prospective parents? Or were you always in a school that parents already knew that this is a good school and they just came and you had really nothing to do in terms of communicating to parents that this is a good school? I just want to understand.
Sure. No, I mean, when I was head in Malvern College in Chengdu, I joined the school in the second year of its startup phase. So we had quite a bit of work to do in terms of marketing the school. We would have, regular open mornings or open days where we would invite prospective parents and students into the school, deliver a presentation, take them on a tour of the school, and then interview the students, the prospective students, and interview prospective parents as well. Also involved in a number of international school fairs and even local Chinese school fairs in Chengdu and elsewhere, where you'd be presenting perhaps to up to 1,000 parents at any particular time. So yes.
Well, that's remarkable, because to know that just having a great school in terms of infrastructure or having a licensed school is not enough. Because I think in Southeast Asia, there's especially at times when parents have to pay for education themselves. If it's a private school, they have options and they may start making selections based on whether the school fits their vision for their children. So it's very interesting. I don't think a lot of principals or directors of studies or academics have that experience or exposure, because I think in the UK, most schools are government schools and they're free and they always have children. Is that just an assumption that I'm making, or is that a fairly accurate?
I would say, in not having been in the UK public state school system for quite a while, but I would say that nowadays all school leaders have to be able to market their school. I think, it's even state-run schools required to have children, and they're in some sort of competition with other schools close by, I would imagine. So everyone has to be able to market their school, whether you're in leadership or even just teaching in the classroom. It's important to be able to say that we're able to promote our school. I think it's a collegiate responsibility, really,
That's so true. And from these different schools across the world, do you notice any commonalities or any insights that you may have on approaches to professional development in teachers? Have you seen anything that probably stands out, or anything that you feel is certainly a success criteria or a success factor, and new schools that could probably want to think of developing their teachers probably be in a better place once they know?
Sure. Sorry. Yeah, professional development is critical in this day and age, and it's vitally important in the modern era, where there's a global teacher recruitment and retention crisis going on. The teachers are unfortunately leaving the education field in their droves. And so we have to make sure that, they see that there's something in it for them. There's a growth pathway. So developing pathways for teachers to go into middle leadership, if that's where they want to be, or just to strengthen their abilities to enhance the learning experience in the classroom is a vitally important aspect of leading a school. When you're interviewing teachers during a recruitment drive, one of the best questions that a teacher will ask you in an interview is, what's the opportunities for professional development within your school? And if you're not able to convince them that you have a good professional development process, then you're not going to attract that teacher. So it's vitally important to them.
That's really interesting that you say that several teachers in interviews may consider that as an indicator of how good a school organization is, because the way they have professional development. In fact, one of my friends was saying that when they recruit or when they interview teachers for their school, they try and make the interview process also such that people who are not in a position to make the cut or get into the organization have learned something so much that it betters their chances of hiring, getting a spot in another school. So I think schools need to realize that interviewing potential candidates for teaching roles is also an opportunity for them to help contribute to generally the teacher education landscape across the world. Yeah. Just moving the conversation a little bit to your online schooling experience, I'm very, very keen to see what are your thoughts on how does the online schooling work? Because we do know that during COVID, all schools are online. Most of them were online. Mm-hmm. And then they snap back to being physically run again. But some schools across the world have actually built their entire school around the online model. So as a director of studies in past schools, which were more physical, what is your thoughts? And I know these are your own personal views about online schooling. How does the online schooling really work? And is there any change in the way the curriculum is planned or the teaching is planned or anything? Like, what does it look like?
I think the most successful online schools are trying to move towards a hybrid type of approach where they offer highly personalized education in small classes where teachers can really get to know their students, and the lessons are live. They are recorded for safeguarding reasons, so students can revisit, but the lessons are live face-to-face sessions, which is very important rather than the sort of asynchronous kind of approach. And so the students are also encouraged to take part in extracurricular activities, even within the online school system. So the best of the online schools really do try to offer as holistic an approach as they possibly can. And of course, they encourage their students to get outside and meet with other students. Some of the online schools now are giving students an opportunity to go on school trips at different points in the year. So field trips and so on, which is a great thing because it gives those students who can get to a central place an opportunity to meet each other for the first time, maybe, which is a wonderful thing. So there's lots of developments going on. Curriculum, again, depends a little bit on what the focus of the school is and their audience, if you know what I mean, the clientele, the target clientele, I suppose, as to what you actually deliver. But the most forward-thinking online schools are looking at developing the problem-based learning approach, project-based learning approach, interdisciplinary work, developing things and trying to integrate the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, into their curriculum through project-based learning. And that's an area that I'm particularly interested in. And I've been doing quite a lot of work on that most recently. The other opportunity that some of the really good schools out there that are working are looking to develop the immersive learning experiences, which is also an area that I am particularly interested in.
So I think we should talk a little bit more about the SDG, because in India, some very few schools have started talking about SDG, and they're trying to see how they can integrate SDG goals within the school. So I'd love to hear more about how you probably, as a school with, maybe 40 kids in a classroom, may or may not be a Cambridge or an IB school. It could be any school, like agnostic to the board. How do we get, let's say, SDG goals into the very thinking of our children, so that I'm guessing the idea is for us to be able to develop children who are a little more aware and who make wiser choices for our planet and community. So that is one question. And if you feel that PBL approach is one of the best ways or the most effective way to start teaching this, then if you could also integrate, how do you bring a project-based approach or a problem-based approach into the teaching inside your classroom, and what does the school have to do or prepare? Anything around that would really help people who might be thinking of.
Sure. I mean, I think it's critical that we do start to empower our students to be able to take action, because they're going to be the guardians of their world and their planet moving forward. And I suppose sometimes we should be making an apology, really, certainly people in my own generation, because let's face it, we haven't done our planet any favours over the last 100 years or so. So it's really important for our children to be equipped with the knowledge, skills and attributes to be able to look after the world that they're going to be living in. So looking at things like project-based learning and interdisciplinary work, that really, when you connect them up with the SDGs, is really a wonderful way to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals into the classroom. I quite recently built a Sustainable Development Goals Project Builder, GPT, which enables teachers to develop projects, interdisciplinary projects, around or focused on the SDG of their choice. And what it allows them to do is to choose whichever SDG they want to work on. You can choose the age group of the students, which country you want to work in, and then from a list of subjects you choose however many subjects you want to include in the project to make it as interdisciplinary as possible. And then once you've done that, it will come up with a choice of launch events that helps kickstart the project, and also a choice of driving questions which underpin the project from all the way through. Moving on from that, we can then look at various activities for each of the subjects that have been chosen. You have an opportunity to upload your schemes of work and your learning outcomes, so that this project doesn't become bolt-on. It becomes built in to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, which I think goes back to answering part of your question in terms of, how do you persuade people that this is not just something that you're doing on the side, that you're still learning the mathematics, the science, the language arts, the humanities, just the same way as you would be, but you're focusing on a real world problem. And if we want to develop the so-called 21st century skills of problem solving, collaboration, communication, doing it through the lens of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals is definitely the way to go, because if we want children to work on real world problems, there's 17 of them that have already been identified, which the world is facing on a day-to-day basis, and they really are real problems. So it ticks all the boxes, both from the academic side and from the soft skills or 21st century skills that we want to encourage in our students.
I love the way you put it, because, rather than focusing on building on, when we build in, I think that really shows that children look at what we're teaching in terms of the SDG and these goals as very, very important and significant, and not just something that good to know, you know. So I think that is beautiful. From that aspect, it's I also like the way you said it, that the UN has put it out there. They've discovered these problems, so we don't have to waste our time or spend any more time trying to find, problems that the world has. I think we need to be trying to be part of the solution, since already the problem has been discovered. It has been beautifully documented. And I also think that the SDG goals comes with a set of initiatives that schools could probably do. But I'm so glad to hear that you built this custom GPT as sustainable goals, and I hope that you would share that link with me. And I would love to share it with over 5,000 educators across India. But we have about 2,000 school leaders who follow, our talks. But we also have a distribution to over 5,000 teachers, and I'd love to share this with them, especially in teachers who are interested in using AI in education. And I would love them to try and use this GPT to start thinking about how they can start teaching, SDG goals. I wanted to understand from you, since you have this experience across different parts of the world, have you ever had an experience culturally inside schools, either from parents or teachers or administrators or the community across these different schools around the world? Did you have a culture shock? Did you see something that you took some time to understand and accept? Does anything like that come to mind?
I don't know that it was something particularly obvious, but you do assimilate the differences in culture as you go through life on a day-to-day basis, I suppose. Yeah, things are very different, for sure. And I suppose one of the biggest differences within a school context is certainly in sort of Southeast Asia, is the concept of saving face, which is really quite predominant. And of course, as Western educators, we're encouraging our children to be open and to ask questions and to think critically all the time, or at least we should be. And that's not necessarily the way that, culturally speaking, that's sometimes quite a difficult barrier for teachers, Western teachers, to overcome with Southeast Asian students who, in the main, have possibly been taught that the teacher is the fount of all knowledge, and you listen quietly and are attentive and so on. So trying to encourage children to ask questions and be open-minded and begin to think critically can be quite a challenge in the beginning. So I would say in school context, that's probably the biggest challenge that you have to try and overcome initially, coming from the West to the East.
That is so profound. The idea of saving face, and especially teachers from the West, if they don't understand this nuance, then they may think that kids have understood it or got it all. From my own personal experience in Indian schools, I've heard in many of our Southeast Asian schools, I've heard the question that teachers put after they teach a concept. They ask a question like, did you understand? Or did you learn this? Whereas in many of the Western parts of the world where I've gone and observed classrooms, teachers ask a question, what did you understand?
Yes. Yeah.
And a friend of mine in a previous conversation, in a previous podcast, told me that one of the most lied to question is, did you understand?
Yeah, because who's going to turn around and say no, I've no clue. Yeah. Especially in that context that you just get, So it's, one of the biggest drives we had when we set up the professional learning communities in our schools in Malaysia with our teachers was to try and develop strong and effective questioning techniques for our teachers in the classroom. Because again, the difference between do you understand and what do you understand is massive. It's a small tweak, but it can have an amazing impact on what you get back. And you have to continue to ask those questions in the various different guises that you can put them together in. But it's a really important skill because if you don't ask, you're never going to find out what your
So I want
students
to ask
know.
you, if this is cultural and if it is maybe slightly more slightly more global South related,
Mm.
do you think it could also be present in teachers from the West or school leaders from the West? Do you think that this mentality may become a barrier with CPD? What are the
I'm
chances?
sorry, Willibrord, I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
If this is a concept of the global South, and we've seen that with students where they want to save face, do you think it could also leak into the teachers from the global North or the global West, and also into teachers across the world? And do you think that could impact the efficacy or the invitation for CPD? How likely is it for us to meet a Western principal or school leader or teacher who's absolutely waiting for let's say CPD or training? You know, how likely are we to meet somebody who says, "Oh, I'm just waiting to learn this new thing. Oh, I'm just waiting to develop myself." I just want to understand, because it seems to be cultural and it seems to be ingrained, and it could probably be in adults as well. So anything you'd like to share around that?
See, I think it depends on the individual, to be honest. I've always tried to be a lifelong learner, as they say, and I'm still teaching myself things today. But I suppose it just depends. It also depends on the methods of delivery and when you do it. Because thinking back to how school inset days are often organised and delivered, and when you're trying to put those things together as a school leader, you have to be very conscious of the fact that, particularly at the start of a school year, teachers want to get into their classrooms and they want to prepare for the new year. So you've got to have that fine balance between sessions where they're going to be working on something new, for example, or something towards the school improvement plan or a new initiative, versus the time that you allow them to get in and, set up the classroom and prepare the materials for the start of the new year. Because there's nothing worse than having spent a lot of time and invested time and effort and money into maybe even bringing in, an external speaker to deliver a CPD session where most of your staff are sitting there thinking, I need to be somewhere else, really, thank you, but just let me get into the classroom and get me set up for the start of next week, So I think it's a multifaceted question, and complex questions and have complex answers kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And from your experience, you've seen so many types of schools across so many countries. What do you think is the future of education? Do you think that education is so complex that probably it's not going to change a lot? You see, because it's just so complex and it takes time for educational systems to change. Or do you feel that the rate at which technology is changing, you feel, or the rate at which we are able to get more information about our brains and how we learn, do you feel that perhaps the future of education is going to look slightly differently and it could shock some of the traditional teachers? Is that something that you think? And what is this metaverse thing? I actually have no clue about the metaverse. So if you'd like to expand on any of these ideas, it would be really nice.
Okay. I'll take the last part first, if that's all right. In terms of the metaverse, I've built a history of mathematics museum in the metaverse. And the idea is it helps teachers to understand a little bit about the nature of mathematics, and how it's developed throughout the ages as a human creation, through human creativity and according to the needs of society. And so that's been built in a platform called Frame VR. But you don't need to have headsets to use it. It's browser based as well. And within there, you can have a chat with Pythagoras and ask him things about how he, came across the Pythagorean theorem, be understood by the relationship between mathematics and music, and so on. So you can have a two-way conversation with him, and he'll help you with it. And the same with Fibonacci and algorithm, and so we're looking at the development of ancient number systems and the Pythagorean theorem and how it relates to music. And you can even have a chat with Tutankhamun about the Egyptian number systems and it's all set within a museum setting, and it's completely immersive. Oh, I'm sorry, Willibrord, I can't hear you.
How does a student or a teacher access that work that you've put on the Metaverse? If you could give us some of the details, so that for people who've never been on the Metaverse, maybe if they want to use this as an invitation to experience it for the first time.
Yeah, I would need to share a link, to the platform. So maybe that's something we can look at perhaps later on. But
you don't need headphones, and
no,
you don't need.
No. You can use it completely through the browser. I think it's to get the full immersive experience. It's great if you've got your headset. But your avatar is there. You can see your avatar. You can see everyone else's avatars, and you can wander through the museum, interact with the different mathematicians. There's presentations to help you learn a bit more about the history. There are problems for you to solve, investigations for you to do in a mathematical sense. So yeah, it's a bit of fun, but it's also hope. Helping students to understand that mathematics is not necessarily something that is discovered. It's more something that is created, usually according to society's needs. But sometimes just because we're curious, Wow. So there's a big debate amongst mathematics philosophers, I suppose, in terms as, whether it's nature versus nurture. Is it created, or is it something that we discover? I think that there's probably an element of the two, but certainly it's something that comes out of the minds of human beings. So, it's an important thing for children to understand that this is something that they can do too, and the reason that I created this History of Maths Museum was it stemmed from when I was studying for my master's degree in mathematics education, a few years ago now, and I was looking for some inspiration for my dissertation study, and I came across a book called Fermat's Last Theorem by a gentleman called Simon Singh, who used to present the Horizon programs on the BBC, science programs on the BBC. Lovely fella. And what happened was that the book was really the story of a problem in mathematics that had existed for over 350 years. And all the greatest mathematicians, the Gauss and Eulers and Newton and all of these guys had tried to solve it, but couldn't. And eventually it was a gentleman called Andrew Wiles, I think in 1994, eventually managed to prove this thing. And Fermat was a bit of a tease. He was a guy he was an amateur mathematician, really. And he used to solve problems in his little notebook, and then he would send them out to other mathematicians around Europe and say, I can do this, can you, kind of thing. And the story goes is that he said, I have a truly wonderful proposition, proof of this proposition, which the margin of my notebook is too small to contain. And so, of course, so no one's ever actually seen Fermat's actual proof of this theorem, which is really like an extension of Pythagoras' theorem, to be honest. It's a very simple theorem in terms of its statement, but very complex in terms of its proof, because the proof that Andrew Wiles eventually delivered runs to over 100 pages of contemporary mathematics that Fermat could never have known. And so, in many respects, the challenge that Fermat set all those years ago is still on, because no one's yet discovered the proof that Fermat had, or says he had. And we'll never know, I suppose, if he ever actually did have it or not. But it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And essentially what it was the story develops all the way from looking at the earliest form of number, the Sumerian cuneiform and notches on bones, through to Egyptian hieroglyphics and Mayan numbers, and then the Hindu-Arabic numeral, and so on, and how mathematics had developed throughout the ages, much of which was due to the needs of society and through human ingenuity and human curiosity. And so that inspired me to write a small booklet and teach it as a course to the children in my school, because what I wanted to do, pardon me, was test their understanding of the nature of mathematics and their attitudes towards it. So I did that through a questionnaire prior to teaching the course, and then taught the course, and then retested afterwards to see if there was any difference. And yeah, it was just a great source of inspiration for me. And within the booklet, at the end of each little sub-chapter, there would be an activity based on the work of the mathematician that they'd been learning about. So I'd always wanted to sort of make an interactive version of that. And now with things like generative AI, that's become possible. And so that's where my History of Maths Museum in the Metaverse has stemmed from.
That's wonderful. And it's so inspiring. And the idea of having mathematical stories and stories of math and how math evolved across different cultures and countries and centuries, that to me is so alien, because, you know, the way we were taught maths, or rather I was taught maths, was this is a problem and just solve the problem. This is a theorem and just learn the theorem by rote and then just learn the application of it. And don't worry if you don't get the whole sum right. As long as you can get the steps correct, you get some of the marks.
Well, to be fair, that's still the way it's taught in many places today. But we're forever hopeful that
Yes,
might change.
we're forever hopeful. To me, I want to ask you, would you be happy to help any school in India or any school across the world set up, something online in the metaverse for them? Is that
Sure,
something
of
that...
course, by all means. I mean,
Wow.
I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination and teaching myself as I go along. But
Wow.
I'm always very willing to help out and collaborate with schools.
That's amazing.
And even just to get them through the basics, get them started, and maybe kickstart some inspiration on different ways that you can do things.
That would be excellent. And also helping schools in India set up their approach towards mathematics. There maybe a mathematics society or a mathematics club, or to be
Sure.
able to set up mini museums of mathematics inside their schools. I think that would be so powerful, and someone with your experience would be able to lead them really quickly through this. So that's really really interesting. Is there anything else that you'd like to speak about or unfold for our audience today, from as you look back at all the work that you've done and what you're looking forward to?
I suppose maybe just going back to the earlier part of your last question in terms of what our hopes are for education. I think, again, forever hopeful. I think it's got to change, but we're up against it in terms of how quickly it will change, because there's a lot invested in the status quo. I think things need to change in different areas before we'll get a pathway all the way through. There's a great collaboration that's going on between Sophia High School and the University of Derby, a gentleman called Paul Glossop. And they've now set up their postgraduate certificate of education, I think it is, in online teaching. And that's a big big development in terms of how things might change in the future. And I think there has to be a focus on how schools and how education might change from the pre-service situation. So for our young teachers coming into the profession, because if we continue just to do the same old with them, then nothing's going to change. So pre-service education is going to be very important if we want transformation. And also at the other end, we have to look at how our university is going to respond to the challenge, because we keep saying, we're preparing children for jobs and professions that we don't even know exist yet. And so how are they going to respond? And this sense of every child being expected to go to a university, that's the aspiration at least. And of course you understand that from a parental perspective, but is that really the way the world's gonna go? So there's lots of things, things like examination boards, standardized tests. Some people believe, well, it's the only real fair way we can assess students. Other people believe, no, you're doing a disservice to so many students who the standardized test doesn't work for. So there's so many other types of skills and things that we should be trying to assess to get a better picture of where our children are at. So there's lots of things to be sorted out before we get to, I think, where we all hope we want to be. So forever hopeful, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Yes, I completely agree that we got to be forever hopeful. At the same time, we got to be working and we got to be changing every day. We got to be learning. As you said, we got to be a lifelong learner, and we have to be at the service of this mission to try and see how we can continually ensure that our children are prepared for a future that both the teacher and the student find daunting. It's just beyond the level of comprehension, especially the speed at which technology is changing and the world is and technology is shaping education. But Gerry, it was so good to talk to you today. And I'm really leaving with so many thoughts around how we could approach schools and how we can appreciate the status quo, yet how we could think of challenging it and changing it, and how we could probably be part of the solution rather. And also, I'm just so inspired to know that you built a custom GPT for SDG, that you integrated SDG into PBL, and you took it a couple of notches further, and you were able to build an entire museum of mathematics in the Metaverse, which phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. As a teacher, as an educator, as an administrative leader, for you to be able to take that stand and for you to be able to work that creatively is it's phenomenal. I think that's inspiring me. I really hope that you can share some of these links with me, and I can put it down in the description of this page, and I can have more teachers and educators and school leaders access the work that you've done. And I hope that some of the school leaders and the school chains who consume this podcast reach out to you on LinkedIn, and they find you through your name, and then they connect with you. And I hope that you will be able to start impacting the lives of so many schools here in India.
Thank you very much indeed, Willibrord, for the opportunity today. Just a last thing, going back to the GPT for a minute in the SDG program. I've just completed working on a course for teachers about how to integrate the SDGs into their teaching and learning in the classroom, and where they will get access to the GPT. And that will be launching soon through Sail In Academy and Sail In Club. That should be up on their website very soon. It's a 90-minute course, 7 modules, and you can learn all about all the different aspects of it.
Absolutely brilliant. As it gets launched, send me the link and I will update all the links below on this particular podcast so that people can get access and start developing their own interest as they delve into these courses. But thank you so much, Gerry Docherty. Absolutely wonderful talking to you, and see you soon at some point in India.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.